You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is She Said My Name Through the Mirror. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. I was brushing my teeth when I first noticed it, the faint scuff of something across the bathroom tiles behind me. Not loud, more a whisper under the hum of the fluorescent light, but enough to make me freeze mid-brush. My reflection didn't move, and the toothpaste foam made my lips stiff, yet I felt the air shift, like someone had just walked past. I shrugged, swiping at the foam and trying to convince myself it was the loose vent in the ceiling, or maybe the wind rattling the front door, but it didn't feel right. The mirror, fogged from the shower I'd taken earlier, had a smudge I didn't remember leaving. "Okay, relax," I muttered, rinsing my mouth and spitting into the sink. I leaned closer, studying my eyes in the glass. They looked tired, sure, but otherwise normal. Normal. The word kept echoing somewhere in my skull as I straightened and flicked off the bathroom light. I walked into the kitchen. The apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts, smelled faintly of coffee and burned toast. I hadn't eaten anything yet, but the lingering smell made my stomach churn a little. My phone vibrated on the counter. I picked it up, no notifications. That was normal too, except I could have sworn the lock screen had briefly flickered. Just for a split second, before the screen settled on the usual time. A glitch, probably. "I swear," I said aloud, though the apartment was empty except for me. "I'm losing it." I didn't notice her then. Her voice came through the kitchen door, soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. "Ellie." I froze. "Who's there?" My voice sounded sharper than I meant, slicing the morning quiet. I think you left this out." She stepped fully into the kitchen, holding a mug. The steam curled like smoke from a dying fire. "Ellie, me, of course." Ellie let out a slow breath and leaned against the counter. I'd recognize her anywhere. Not someone lurking in the shadows, not some prankster neighbor. Just her, Nicole, the only person I'd ever let know that I checked the locks twice every night. Nicole, 29, female, soft-spoken with a tendency to over-explain herself, especially when she was nervous. She worked at the same publishing house I did, and she had a laugh that sounded like a bell in a drafty room. Her flaw, she hated confrontation, so much she sometimes froze, while everything around her burned. "Sorry," she said, eyes darting to the counter. I didn't know you'd be up." She put down the mug and rubbed her arms like she was cold. The apartment wasn't cold. "Morning," I said, forcing a smile. "Coffee." "Thanks, just a quick one." She poured, the hiss of coffee against ceramic louder than it should have been, the aroma biting my nose. We moved to the small table by the window, where the winter light caught the frost clinging to the panes. Outside, a faint hum of traffic made its way up from Massachusetts Avenue. Inside, the apartment smelled of brewing coffee and something else I couldn't place, like the faint metallic tang of a scratch on metal, or old pennies left in a drawer. My heart ticked up, slow and deliberate, and I forced it back down. So Nicole started, fiddling with the mug handle. Weekend plans. Nothing, I shrugged. Laundry, maybe grocery shopping. Her lips pressed together. She nodded, but didn't seem satisfied. I didn't press. I knew the look. She was worried about something, and she wanted me to ask, and she didn't want to say it first. A dull thump from the bathroom made both of us jump. I grabbed my mug tightly. Nicole's hand lingered near mine, almost touching. She didn't pull back. I thought I heard. She stopped herself. "Yeah," I said, voice even, though I felt the hair on my neck bristle. Probably just the vent. Old building. But as we sat there, sipping coffee, I noticed the mirror again. The same smudge, or maybe a new one. A streak in the fog where someone's hand could have passed. Or maybe my own. Ellie, Nicole's voice was softer now, almost too quiet to catch. "Do you ever get that feeling like someone's, I don't know, just outside your sight?" I set my mug down. "You mean like paranoia?" Maybe. She looked out the window at nothing. Her shoulders were tense. Or just, I don't know, watched. I didn't respond. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to. My own private fear, one I'd never admit even to Nicole, was that I was losing track of what was real. Maybe something wasn't adding up, and I was too rational, too careful to notice until it was too late. The radiator clicked, then hissed. A car door slammed outside. A pigeon fluttered along the windowsill. Ordinary, everyday sounds, but my stomach didn't settle. Nicole set her mug down, and I noticed her hand shaking just slightly. She pulled her sleeves over her hands, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "So," she said, eyes meeting mine, "we should probably check the doors again. Make sure the locks are." I nodded, swallowing. "Yeah, good idea." The choice hung in the air. Do we leave it, accept the strange noises as normal? Or do we go inspect the apartment, step into a small but undeniable crack in our reality, and see what's waiting? Nicole was already moving toward the hallway, and I had no excuse to stay behind. The mirror in the bathroom waited silently. I didn't look at it. Not yet. We moved down the narrow hallway toward the front door, Nicole leading with a tentative step. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. My instincts screamed at me to check the locks twice, maybe 3 times. She glanced at me, eyes sharp now, no longer hiding behind a coffee cup fumbling or small talk. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, a tremor threading through her voice. "I think it was the radiator," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. The click and hiss of the old system had always been part of the apartment's soundtrack. But this morning, it sounded hollow, like a mimic of movement, like someone packing just beyond the frame of vision. Nicole shook her head. "No, something else." I sighed. She had a point. My private fear, the one I barely admitted even to myself, was that I could over-rationalize things until reality blurred. Maybe I was imagining patterns. Maybe my mind was just straining under too little sleep and too much caffeine. We reached the door. I bent, fumbling for the keys, and then I froze. One of the locks, the top deadbolt, was slightly ajar. Just a hair, barely noticeable, but it shouldn't be. I remembered locking it last night. My stomach tightened. Ellie, Nicole's voice was sharp this time. She pointed at the lock, eyes wide. It's open. Someone could have been in here. I swallowed. Maybe I didn't lock it properly. Maybe my voice trailed off. Maybe someone left it like that, she said, her hands shaking as she pushed a strand of hair back. Ellie, we can't just ignore this. I nodded, taking a deep breath. The city outside the window buzzed faintly. Somewhere down below, a car alarm chirped and stopped. Ordinary noise, yet somehow louder in the morning stillness. All right, I said. We checked the apartment, room by room. Slowly, nothing sudden. Nicole hesitated, biting her lip. Her flaw was clear. Confrontation paralyzed her. But her fear today was palpable, and it pushed her forward anyway. We started in the living room. The floorboards creaked under our weight. Books sat where we had left them. The laptop on the coffee table was closed. I ran my hand over the back of the sofa. No movement beneath. Everything looks normal, I whispered, more to myself than to her. Doesn't feel normal, she muttered. Her eyes kept darting toward the mirror in the hallway, a long, narrow rectangle framed in dark wood. That mirror had been a focal point all morning. The smudge was still there, faint but persistent. We moved to the bedroom. I opened the door, and the room smelled faintly of something burnt, like toast again, but sharper, acrid. The sheets were rumpled, the window slightly cracked open. I hadn't left it that way. My pulse quickened. I didn't open this, I said. Nicole reached for the curtains. Someone could have, she stopped, her voice caught in her throat. Her hands trembled, and she let the fabric fall. I took a step forward, scanning the closet. Everything hung as it should, but the faint metallic tang was stronger here. I realized it was the brass of the dresser knobs combined with something else. Sweat prickled along my neck. Then the phone rang. My phone, the one on the counter in the kitchen, vibrated violently on the nightstand. Nicole jumped back. I grabbed it. Caller ID unknown. No number. I stared at it. Who the hell calls this early and doesn't leave a number? Nicole grabbed my arm. Don't answer it. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Another vibration, more insistent. Then a text flashed. I see you. The words made my stomach drop. My rational mind screamed, it's a prank. Someone's screwing with us. But deep in my chest, my fear, the one I never voiced, tightened. Maybe I hadn't imagined the scuffing sound, the flickering phone, the smudge on the mirror. Maybe something was already inside the apartment. I'm calling the police, I said. No, do, Nicole said, grabbing the receiver. If it's someone inside, they'll know. Her voice cracked. Her fear paralyzed her just as she tried to act. I swallowed and tried to stay calm. We need to secure the apartment first, then call. We moved toward the bathroom, the hallway mirror stretched between us. Nicole paused. Do you think someone could be in there? Hiding. I shook my head, though my throat was dry. Probably not, but we'll check. Step slow. Stay close. I opened the bathroom door. Nothing. Tiles as cold as they'd always been, sink clean, shower curtain drawn. But the mirror, the streaks looked sharper now, almost like fingerprints pressed too heavily. I stared for a long moment. Could be steam condensation. Could be someone else. Before I could decide, the lights flickered. Just for a moment, but long enough to make Nicole jump. I reached for the switch. They came back on. Okay, I said, forcing calm. Enough weird for one morning. Let's lock the door and call the cops. We headed back to the front, but the doorknob didn't turn smoothly. Someone had wedged it, barely, but enough to stop a normal turn. Panic hit both of us at once. Nicole pressed herself against the wall, lips pressed together. I told you, she whispered. Someone's here. Someone is here. I tried again. The lock refused. Then another vibration from my phone, text flashing. I'm closer. We exchanged a look that said everything. Our morning coffee, our ordinary routines, all of it had vanished in an instant. The choice was forced. Confront, call, or wait and hope. Waiting wasn't an option. But just as I grabbed a nearby metal lamp, impulse over strategy, there was a knock from the other side of the door. Slow. I gripped the metal lamp tighter, its weight solid in my hands, but not enough to make me feel safe. Nicole pressed against the wall beside me, eyes wide, jaw tight. The slow knock on the door had stopped, but the sound of movement from the other side made our hearts hammer against our ribs. Ellie, what do we do? Nicole whispered. Her voice shook despite the calm she usually tried to project. Listen, I said, keeping my voice low. We need a plan. Step 1, get to a safe room. Bedroom's okay. Close the door behind us and barricade it. Step 2, call the police. She nodded, fumbling as she stepped into the narrow hallway. I followed, careful not to brush the mirror. The reflection made me uneasy, and every flicker of light on the glass seemed to elongate the smudge. My pulse spiked with each step. We pushed into the bedroom. I slammed the door and tried the lock again. It clicked, but didn't feel secure. Nicole shoved the dresser toward it. Heavy, awkward, scraping the hardwood floor. I felt sweat bead at my temples as the effort left us both breathless. Better, she asked, voice trembling. For now. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear anything. Nothing but the muffled hum of traffic outside and the hiss of the radiator. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The line connected. Police, what's your emergency? I explained quickly. Apartment, Cambridge, possible intruder. Deadbolt tampered with. The dispatcher assured us they were on their way, but ETA 10 to 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes in which someone or something was inside our apartment. We leaned against the bed, trying to steady our breathing. The weight of adrenaline made our limbs ache. Nicole rubbed her arms, her hands shaking so violently I thought she might drop the phone. I looked at the hallway mirror again. The smudge seemed darker now, almost like a handprint pressed across the glass. But I told myself it was condensation or residue from cleaning. Minutes passed, each tick of the wall clock louder than the last. I whispered, "We need to check the other rooms, make sure he or whoever hasn't left a trap or an escape route." Nicole flinched. "Are you crazy? We barely secured this room." "I'm not crazy. We need to know." Reluctantly, she followed. We crept to the living room. I swung the lamp ahead of me like a baseball bat. The couch cushions looked normal, the books in order. The window was still cracked. Then a shadow darted past the sheer curtain. Nicole screamed, yanking my arm. "It's him," she shrieked. I froze. My heart slammed into my chest. I gripped the lamp, ready to strike. But then the fluttering shadow resolved itself, a pigeon trapped between the curtain and the glass. Its wings batted frantically. Nicole exhaled shakily, pressing her face into my shoulder. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my chest felt tight. "False alarm. But we're not safe yet. Let's check the kitchen." The kitchen door creaked under our hands. I noticed something odd. The fridge door wasn't fully closed. I hadn't left it that way. Nicole leaned over to push it shut, and inside, the eggs were slightly jostled, some cracked. A small trickle of yolk ran along the shelf. Nothing else appeared stolen. "Looks like someone rifled through here," I muttered, heart hammering. "But why?" Nicole's voice was quiet. "Maybe looking for something." I nodded, knowing the only thing left unexamined was the bathroom. We exchanged a look. That mirror, it had been the first thing to unsettle me. Now, it felt like a warning. I moved first. Nicole followed closely. The bathroom light flickered as I pushed the door open. No one. Tiles gleamed under the weak fluorescent glow. The shower curtain swayed slightly, though there was no draft. I checked behind it. Empty. I exhaled, but then noticed something. The smudge on the mirror had shifted, or maybe I had been too tense to see it clearly before. It was smeared down the glass, like someone had pressed their palm and dragged it downward. I recoiled. "Ellie," Nicole whispered. Her hand grazed the edge of the counter. "Someone's here. I know it." Before I could respond, a faint tapping came from the window. Something light, elaborate. My first thought, the broken branch from the tree outside, brushing against the glass. I swung the lamp toward it. No, the tapping continued in a rhythmic pattern, deliberate enough to make my stomach tighten. I looked closer, heart racing. A bird. No, something small, trying to make noise. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the reflection of the radiator cover leaning slightly forward. The tapping was coming from a loose panel that I'd ignored. False alarm again. Relief washed over me, but only briefly. We were exhausted. Our muscles burned from moving furniture, our nerves frayed from adrenaline, our thoughts spiraling in worst-case scenarios. I leaned against the sink. We've checked everywhere. It has to be safe now, right? Nicole shook her head. I don't know, Ellie. That lock, the phone, someone knows we're here. I realized she was right. Every false alarm had been plausible, grounding us. But everyone also reminded us that our perception was fragile. The tension was cumulative. Then I heard it. A single, deliberate click, the front door latch being manipulated again. Our eyes met. The safe room, barricaded as it was useless now. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't giving up. We can't wait, I said, voice low, urgent. We have to do something. Nicole's face paled, lips pressed tight. Like what? I grabbed the lamp again, listening. Another faint shift at the door handle. Whoever it was knew we were trapped, and there was no retreat. The point of no return had arrived. Our ordinary morning had vanished, replaced by the knowledge that the apartment, the sanctuary of routine and safety, was compromised. And any hesitation now would leave us vulnerable. The latch on the front door rattled again, this time harder, more urgent. Nicole pressed herself into the bedroom corner, eyes wide, clutching the blanket I had thrown over the dresser to barricade the door. I gripped the metal lamp like a lithe alien, muscles taut, every sense screaming. The intruder wasn't messing around anymore. I'm going to try to see if I can hold them off, I whispered. Nicole's lips trembled. No, don't. I have to. I edged to the door, leaning the lamp against the handle to jam it as best I could. My knuckles were white, sweat ran down my temples. Another series of sharp clicks came from the outside, the doorknob twisting, the metal scraping against the deadbolt. Whoever it was had found a way to bypass the barricade I thought would hold. Then the first blow came. A hard kick against the door shook the frame. My shoulder slammed into it to brace it, teeth gritting. Nicole gasped behind me. The lamp wobbled, threatening to slip. Another kick, and the barricade shifted slightly, enough for a fraction of the door to give. I shouted, Nicole, get the phone ready. She fumbled, dialing 911 again. Her hands shook so badly, I nearly had to grab it. The door rattled once more, then silence. My chest heaved. I lowered the lamp slightly, trying to steady my vision, when a shadow flickered under the door crack. My pulse was hammered. The moment of hesitation, a breath I didn't take, was all it took. The door burst open with a violent slam. I swung the lamp with everything I had, connecting with a shoulder. The figure staggered back, letting out a grunt. Nicole screamed and scrambled toward me. I could see him clearly now. A young man, ragged jacket, jeans torn, face partially obscured by a hoodie. Not a monster, just a desperate human. He lunged again. I shoved Nicole behind me and braced, swinging the lamp like a club. He grabbed it mid-swing, yanking it from my hands. The metal hit the floor with a clatter. My arm stung where it slammed into the door frame. Nicole cried out. I turned, seeing him reach for the dresser, maybe to push it aside, maybe to get at her. Instinct took over. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a hardcover book from the nightstand, and hurled it. It hit him square in the chest, staggering him backward into the hallway. Run, I shouted, grabbing Nicole's arm. We bolted toward the bathroom, the mirror. I had no plan, only movement. The door to the bathroom slammed behind us. The smudge on the mirror now seemed like a marker, a visual cue of intrusion. I yanked the mirror cabinet open and shoved Nicole inside, crouching beside her. From outside, the intruder cursed, hammering against the bedroom door. My heart thumped like a jackhammer. Then a pause, silence too long. I risked a glance through the crack in the bathroom door. He was gone. Footsteps receded down the hallway. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to detect anything. A faint shuffle, then nothing. Is he? Nicole's whisper broke the tension. I don't know, I admitted, voice low, trembling. But we can't stay here. I remembered the window, the crack we had noticed earlier. I pried it open slowly, careful not to alert him if he was still nearby. Frosted glass, a drop to the fire escape, maybe 10 feet to the ground. I gritted my teeth. No perfect escape, just the one we could make. Can you do it? I asked Nicole. She nodded, trembling. I think so. I helped her through first. Her legs shook. She nearly slipped, but I caught her wrist. I followed, boots scraping against metal, limbs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Below, the street was empty, just the soft hum of traffic. The night air bit at my skin. We ran. Half a block down Massachusetts Avenue, gasping, shivering, hearts hammering, ears straining for any sound behind us. Eventually, we stopped, crouched behind a parked car, trying to catch our breath. Sirens in the distance, police finally. Relief crashed over us, but it was hollow. We had escaped, yes, but the physical toll was immediate. Bruises, scrapes, chafed skin, aching muscles, and the relentless pounding of adrenaline. Nicole sat against the curb, tears streaking her face. I thought we were done. I shook my head. We're safe for now. But the apartment, the mirror, the texts, they lingered in my mind. That smudge, the shifted furniture, the partial lock, every detail replayed, unrelenting. By the time police arrived, we were shivering, exhausted, barely able to recount the sequence without tripping over our own nerves. The intruder had vanished before they entered the building. An empty apartment, no sign of forced entry beyond the minor tampering, no obvious clue to why he had been there, or if he intended to return. I looked at Nicole. She was pale, teeth chattering. Our hands brushed, a shared, silent acknowledgement of what had just happened. Survival had come at a cost. Physical, yes, but emotional and psychological scars ran deeper. That ordinary morning, with coffee and frost on the window, had become an indelible memory of fear, improvisation, and desperation. And the mirror, the smudge, remained in my mind. A reminder that what's human, tangible, and explainable can still unsettle you more than anything else. The police report felt like a strange formality, a way to document chaos in neat bullet points that couldn't contain the tension we'd felt. Nicole sat across from me at the small table in the precinct interview room, knees pressed together, hands folded tightly. The blue overhead lights made the skin under her eyes look almost gray. I rubbed my temples, muscles sore, throat hoarse from shouting and adrenaline. They had taken statements, photographed the disturbed locks, the slight scratches on the bedroom floor, and the smudged mirror that had haunted us all morning. The intruder was still at large. According to the officers, he had no prior reports in the area, an unknown presence who could have been anyone. Someone desperate, someone human, someone we might see again. Afterward, Nicole and I returned to the apartment. Walking through the front door felt both familiar and foreign. The smell of coffee lingered faintly in the kitchen. Sunlight hit the frost, still clinging to the windows. I noticed the mirror immediately, clean and ordinary, though I could still see the memory of the smudge in my mind. I didn't touch it. Nicole didn't either. We moved slowly through the rooms. Furniture had been returned to its approximate place. The fridge door had been pushed shut, the cracked eggs thrown away. Everything looked ordinary again. Yet the cracks were everywhere, tiny imperfections that screamed at the edges of perception. A missing key detail here, a scratch there. The apartment felt smaller, less safe, like a space that had been invaded and wouldn't entirely forgive. Nicole set herself on the couch. I keep thinking about the texts, she murmured. Do you think he was inside all along when he sent them? I hesitated. I wanted to reassure her. Maybe, I said, maybe not. We'll never know for sure. It was the truth. The uncertainty settled over us, heavier than the physical strain. We called a locksmith, changed the locks, and reinforced the doors. I checked the deadbolt 5 times, Nicole watching silently. We spoke little. Words felt inadequate. After the locksmith left, we moved to the bedroom. I touched the dresser. A tiny bruise on my shoulder from the morning's scuffle throbbed painfully. Nicole traced her fingers along the edge of the bed frame, as if mapping the trauma into something tangible. Later, I sat on the floor with a towel around my scraped wrists. Nicole brought coffee in silence. Neither of us wanted conversation, but the act of ordinary life, holding a cup, sipping warm liquid, felt like a minor victory. We both knew the intruder could return, though it was unlikely, and yet that thought lingered in the back of our minds. We couldn't ignore it entirely. We went through our routines the next day as best we could, though sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the radiator, every flicker of the fluorescent kitchen light made us pause, listen, calculate. We called friends, told them the story in fragmented sentences, skipping details where memory failed us. People were supportive, yes, but none could truly understand the slow, grinding sense that the apartment, the mirror, and the tiny gaps in our perception had been permanently altered. Nicole left the apartment first the following morning, to work, to errands, to the world outside our bubble. I watched her go, boots crunching against the frost-hardened sidewalk. I wanted to speak, to say something that might calm the lingering tremor in her chest, but all I could manage was a nod. The city carried on as if nothing had happened. Cars roared, buses hissed, the faint clatter of a construction crew echoed down the street. Normal life resumed, indifferent to the fracture in our mourning. I lingered in the apartment, staring at the mirror. The reflection was exact, but I knew better. The smudge existed in memory, a warning I carried with me. I thought about the intruder's texts, the taps at the window, the subtle scrape of the door latch. He could be gone. He might never come back. And yet, the faintest worry, rational or not, lingered in my mind. The apartment felt lived in but fragile, as though it had survived the storm, but bore the marks invisibly beneath the surface. Nicole called later that evening. We spoke quietly. I asked her how she felt. She said she was tired. She didn't mention the fear in her dreams. I didn't mention mine. We shared the ordinary gestures, checking locks, turning on lights, shutting doors carefully. Small acts of reassurance that felt necessary. By the next week, the apartment seemed to settle again. Routine returned. Coffee in the morning, email, work calls, the rhythm of daily life. Yet the mirror, ordinary as it looked, remained a touchstone of unease. Every so often, when sunlight angled just right, I thought I saw a faint line along the glass. Could be residue, could be condensation, could be nothing. But I never touched it again. We learned something about ourselves in those hours of terror. Nicole had acted despite her fear. I had improvised, made decisions I hadn't thought I could make. But we were changed. The ordinary world had cracks now, minor ones that wouldn't heal, reminders that normalcy was delicate, human, and easily breached. And in the quietest moments, when the apartment hummed around me and frost clung to the windows, I wondered if we had truly seen the last of him, or if the mirror, the smudge, and the gap in the locks were still holding something unseen in reserve. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is She Smiled at Me Through the Dark with Too Many Teeth. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. The street lamp outside flickered once, twice, then sputtered out completely, leaving the corner of West 9th and elm bathed in a pool of soft, pale shadow. For a moment, the world shrank into that circle of failing light. A car passed by, its tires humming on wet asphalt, then was gone, swallowed by the dark that seemed to lean in closer. I was halfway down the block, keys clutched in my hand, trying to unlock the door of the tiny apartment I'd rented 6 months ago. My fingers were numb from the cold, and the wind tasted like damp concrete and exhaust fumes. But that was normal for October in Portland. The usual routine, the usual walk home. Then I heard the laugh, low, breathy, close. It didn't quite fit. It wasn't the laughter of someone joking with a friend or drunk at a bar. It was rougher, a half hiss, like someone trying too hard to sound casual. I stopped, heart picking up, ears straining. But the street was empty, save for the rustle of dry leaves spiraling down from the cracked maple tree outside my window. "Hello," I called, voice quieter than I wanted. No reply. I shook it off. Just a late-night passerby or someone playing a prank. Still, I kept my eyes darting over the darkened sidewalks as I slipped inside. The lock clicked behind me, solid and reassuring. Inside, the apartment smelled like old wood and the faint, sharp trace of lemon cleaner. I turned on the kitchen light, the hum of the bulb filling the quiet, and leaned against the counter. My breath fogged the window, and beyond, the street lamp flickered again, stubbornly fighting the dark. My name, Jack. I'm 28, a copy editor for a small publishing house downtown. The work is steady enough, though nothing spectacular. A far cry from what I'd imagined when I moved here from Chicago. But I like the city, the gray skis, and the damp. The way the rain softens everything. I live alone, which suits me fine. I'm not great with people, really. I get anxious around crowds, and when I'm tired, I start overthinking conversations I had days ago. I try not to show it, but I'm always on edge, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. Right now, that thing felt like a loose thread, small and irritating. Something just off in the evening air, a feeling I couldn't shake. The knock came at the door just as I was about to make some coffee. Quick, sharp, hesitant. I froze. Nobody I was expecting. Jack, the voice was familiar but strained. It was Claire. Claire is 26, a freelance graphic designer, and the closest thing to a friend I have here. She's got this restless energy, always moving, always talking, the kind of person who would be out at a bar every Friday if she could afford it. She's sharp, sarcastic, but genuinely kind underneath. We met a few months ago through a mutual acquaintance, and lately she's been dropping by more often, especially when I'm too quiet. I opened the door. Claire stood there, wrapped in a heavy coat, her cheeks pink from the cold, hair damp like she'd been caught in the drizzle. Her eyes were flickering nervously between the street and me. "Hey," she said, voice low. "You hear that? The weird noise outside, like laughing or something." I nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was just someone messing around." She stepped inside quickly, glancing behind her before closing the door. I was walking home from the studio, and I swear, it felt like someone was following me for a block. I frowned. "You sure? Maybe just a dog or something." Claire shook her head. "No, it was different. The laugh was wrong, like it didn't belong. We stood there for a moment, the quiet stretching out between us. The city sounds seemed distant, a muffled siren, a bus rumbling in the far distance, a car door slamming somewhere 2 blocks over. Then Claire pulled her phone out, scrolling through the news feed. "Did you see anything on the news?" "Nothing about disturbances or break-ins." "No," I said. "I checked earlier. Just the usual, some traffic accident near the river." Claire's fingers hovered over the screen, then she tucked the phone back in her pocket. "Maybe it's nothing, but I don't like it. You ever get that feeling, Jack? Like something's just waiting in the dark, watching." I wanted to tell her it was silly, that it was probably just the shadows playing tricks, but I didn't. Because part of me felt it too, that prickling sensation, the tiny hairs rising on my arms. We ended up sitting on the threadbare couch, cups of lukewarm coffee between us, the kitchen light casting long shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The window rattled slightly in the wind, and outside, the street lamp finally gave up, plunging the corner into full darkness. Claire leaned forward, voice dropping even lower. "You know, when I was a kid, my mom used to tell me to never look into the dark when I was scared, like it could see you if you did." I smiled half-heartedly. Sounds like something my grandma would say. Nothing in the dark but shadows. She didn't laugh. "Yeah, well, I'm not so sure anymore." Her words hung in the air between us. The laugh had been the only crack in an otherwise normal night, but it was enough to twist the familiar into something strange. The phone buzzed on the table. Claire glanced down, a text from her roommate saying she was going to stay late at work. "Looks like I'm stuck here tonight," Claire said, half joking, but the edge in her voice was real. I shrugged. "Well, you're welcome to stay. It's not like I'm doing anything else." We fell into a silence that wasn't quite comfortable, each of us listening for the next sound outside. The rain started again, soft and steady, pattering against the windows. Then the power flickered, just for a second, but long enough to make the shadows leap. When the lights came back on, Claire was staring at the corner near the window, her eyes wide and frozen. I followed her gaze. There was nothing there, but still, the feeling wasn't gone. The lights had just steadied when the power went out again. This time, the whole building plunged into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator died. The faint glow of streetlights vanished behind heavy clouds. It was the kind of blackout that felt immediate and complete, like the world had folded in on itself. Claire let out a breath, her voice sharp in the silence. "Great, just great." I fumbled for my phone, the screen bright in the darkened room. Probably the storm getting worse. Power lines down somewhere. She reached for the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. The street was pitch black, nothing but thick shadows pressing up against the buildings. No cars, no people. It's like everyone just disappeared. I swallowed hard, the room suddenly feeling smaller. The edges of the peeling wallpaper and chipped counters faded into murky shapes. "Should I call the landlord?" Claire asked, voice tight. "He's usually responsive, but this is." "Better start here," I interrupted, already dialing the number for the local utility company. My fingers trembled slightly. Being cut off from the world like this was the worst. I hated feeling trapped. The line rang once, twice, then an automated message. Due to widespread outages, wait times are longer than usual. Claire sighed, of course. Maybe we should check the circuit breaker. Maybe something tripped in the apartment. I stood, groping my way toward the small closet in the hallway. Claire followed, flashlight flickering in her hand, its beam jittery across the cracked walls. I opened the breaker panel. Everything looked normal, no switches flipped. Nothing here. She peered over my shoulder, biting her lip. Okay, that means it's probably outside, right? Yeah. I hesitated. The unease from earlier settled heavier in my chest. The dark wasn't just absence of light anymore. It was suffocating. Suddenly, from somewhere below us, a loud thump echoed, sharp, heavy, like something banging against metal. Claire jumped, flashlight beam darting wildly. What the hell was that? I tried to steady my voice. Maybe a trash can got knocked over, or someone working in the basement. No one's supposed to be down there this late. I nodded. The building was mostly empty at night, except for a couple of tenants who kept to themselves. The thumping came again, this time faster, rhythmic, like a pounding fist. Should we check it out? Claire asked, eyes wide but curious. I shook my head. I don't know. I mean, we don't even know if it's safe. Maybe call the front desk or the landlord again. Claire's face darkened. What if nobody's answering? What if there's someone in the building? We heard those laughs earlier, Jack. That's not nothing. My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But part of me screamed it was all just paranoia. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there wasn't friendly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and grabbed my jacket. Okay, let's go check it out together. Claire nodded. She tucked her phone into her pocket and grabbed the flashlight from the counter. We crept down the narrow hallway, the wooden floorboards groaning beneath our feet. The emergency exit signs flickered faintly, barely lighting the way. The air smelled damp and stale, a mix of old wood and cleaning chemicals. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement door was cracked open, the darkness beyond swallowing the thin beam of the flashlight. Should we call someone? The cops, Claire whispered. I don't want to overreact if it's nothing, I said, voice low. But if we see something, we call. We stepped through the door, the echo of our breathing loud in the confined space. The thumping had stopped. The basement was a mess of old boxes, forgotten furniture, and cobwebbed corners. Water dripped somewhere nearby, and I could hear the faint hum of the building's main generator struggling to keep emergency lights on. Suddenly, the flashlight caught something, a figure crouched near the back wall. A woman. Her hair was wild, eyes glinting in the beam, and she was smiling. But it wasn't a friendly smile. Her teeth looked off, too many, too sharp. I blinked, heart pounding. Hey, are you okay? She didn't answer, only smiled wider, the sound of a breathy chuckle escaping her. Claire grabbed my arm, trembling. Jack, we should go. I wanted to run, but something stopped me, the woman's eyes. There was a flicker of something real beneath the smile. Fear, desperation. Then the woman suddenly stood, and bolted past us, knocking over a stack of crates. The crash echoed like gunfire in the tight space. "Stop," Claire shouted, but the woman disappeared into the shadows. We stood frozen, the darkness pressing in, the smell of damp and rust filling the air. "Should we follow her?" Claire asked, voice barely audible. I shook my head. "No, we don't know what she's capable of." But then the basement door slammed, shut behind us. We were trapped. The basement was a maze of shadows and stale air, the flashlight beam flickering uncertainly as we circled around the cluttered storage room. The smell of damp wood and rust was thick enough to taste. The power was still out, leaving us to rely on that weak circle of light, barely enough to push back the blackness pressing in on all sides. Claire's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. I could hear it against the silence, louder than I wanted. "We need to find a way out," she said, voice shaking. "That door is locked tight. Maybe there's an emergency exit." I nodded, trying to keep my own panic from seeping into my voice. "Okay, let's look." We moved slowly, stepping over scattered boxes and overturned chairs, each creak or scrape amplified in the hollow space. The basement was bigger than I'd expected, a rectangular room that stretched maybe 30 feet long and 20 wide, with a low ceiling that made the air feel thicker. On the far side, a heavy metal door marked "Emergency Exit" caught the light. I hurried over and tried the handle. Locked. The latch was rusted, but the mechanism wouldn't budge. "Damn," Claire whispered. "Do you think it's stuck or actually locked?" "Locked," I said, pulling out my phone for the flashlight app. I'd been saving the battery and shining it on the door. There was a small window near the top, but the glass was dark with grime. I couldn't see through it. "Maybe there's a key around here," Claire suggested. We started searching the piles of junk. Old tools, broken furniture, stacks of dusty cardboard boxes marked with faded writing. The air was getting colder and damper, and I felt a tightening in my chest, that creeping feeling that the walls were closing in. I crouched down to peek behind a crate when a sudden noise made me freeze. A soft, dragging sound coming from the corner, opposite the emergency exit. Claire stiffened beside me. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," my voice was barely a whisper. We edged toward the sound, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam landed on a pile of old mattresses stacked against the far wall, but nothing stirred. "Must be a rat," I said, trying to keep calm. Then the noise came again, heavier this time, like something sliding slowly across the concrete floor. Suddenly, from behind the mattresses, a large metal pipe clattered loudly to the ground. Claire jumped back, knocking over a box, and the flashlight swung wildly, casting grotesque shapes against the walls. "Relax," I said, heart pounding. "Probably just a rat or some loose pipe." But the unease lingered. My palms were slick with sweat, and my legs felt weak. "We can't just wait here," Claire said, urgency creeping into her voice. "We need to figure out another way." We retraced our steps toward the stairwell where we'd come down. The metal door there was still shut, but at least not locked. I pulled on the handle. It moved slightly. "Maybe we can force it open," Claire suggested. I glanced down at the old wooden chair by the stair landing, its leg broken, but still sturdy enough. I set it under the handle and tried to leverage it. The door budged, then creaked open just enough for a sliver of cold air to slice through the darkness. Claire stuck her head out, eyes scanning the empty hallway above. "Looks clear," she whispered. I gave the door a shove. It swung open to reveal the dimly lit stairwell leading up to the ground floor. The emergency lighting was weak, but working. Relief washed over me. We're almost out. But then we heard it, a sharp, wet scraping sound from below. Claire grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, heart thudding. "Yeah." We strained to listen. The sound came again, louder, slow, deliberate footsteps on concrete. Claire's voice was barely audible. "It's her, the woman from before." I felt a cold stab of fear. The idea of that smile, too many teeth, all gleaming, was lodged in my mind. "Come on," I said. "We have to move." We rushed up the stairs, the air growing warmer with each step. But the sound of footsteps followed relentlessly, echoing in the stairwell. At the landing, Claire slipped on the worn concrete, catching herself against the wall, but scraping her knee. "I'm fine," she muttered, but her voice cracked. The pain made her stumble, and I caught her before she fell. "We need to keep going," I urged, fear sharpening my words. At the ground floor door, I fumbled with the lock, hands trembling. It was supposed to be unlocked during emergencies, but it resisted. "Come on," Claire said, pulling at the door. Finally, it gave way, and we spilled into the hallway, gasping. The building was eerily silent, the emergency lights casting long pools of orange glow. We looked around, no sign of the woman. "Maybe she stayed in the basement," Claire said, rubbing her bleeding knee. "I hope," I replied, though my gut twisted. We decided to call the landlord again. Claire tried, but the line was busy. "Maybe we should call the cops," she said, voice rising. I shook my head. No signal, the blackouts affecting the cell towers. Claire groaned. "Great, so we're trapped." We moved cautiously through the building, trying to find a common area or a lobby phone. The hallways smelled of stale smoke and dust. Shadows clung to corners like webs. Suddenly, a door at the end of the corridor creaked open. We froze. From inside, the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. "Hello," Claire called softly. The door swung wider. An elderly man stepped out, face pale but calm. "Sorry about the blackout," he said, voice shaking slightly. "I'm Harold. I live on the 3rd floor. Thought I heard noises." Relief flooded us. "You're okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, I came down to check." I looked past him towards the stairwell. "Did you see anyone? A woman, maybe?" Harold's brow furrowed. "No, but I heard a noise, like someone crying." Claire swallowed hard. "Crying down here?" Harold shrugged. "Could be a neighbor." The relief was short-lived. Back in the stairwell, a sound caught my attention. A soft, muffled sob coming from a maintenance closet across the hall. We approached carefully. The door was ajar, and inside, a woman huddled in the corner, eyes red and wet. "Are you okay?" Claire asked gently. She looked up, and for a second, her mouth twisted into a smile. But it was normal this time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to scare anyone." We exchanged a look. "Why are you here?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The sobs came again, echoing in the silent building. Suddenly, a loud bang sounded from the basement door. We spun around. Harold's face appeared at the top of the stairs, shouting, "The generator's failing. We've got to get out before the emergency lights go." Panic bubbled up. The basement door, the woman with the strange smile, all pieces of a puzzle we didn't yet understand. But now, the blackout was becoming more than an inconvenience. It was a race against time. The emergency lights sputtered, their dim red glow faltering as the generator's hum wavered like a dying breath. We stood in the narrow stairwell, the locked basement door looming behind us, thick and final. The entire building felt like it was holding its breath. Claire's scraped knee was bleeding again, the dried blood mixing with fresh tears. She pressed her palm to the wound, face pale but determined. "We don't have much time," Harold said, his voice shaking. "If the lights go out, we're trapped. I mean completely." I swallowed hard, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. The whole building could go dark at any moment. We had to move. "Okay," I said, voice tight. "We need to get out through the front door." Harold nodded toward the main lobby a few floors up. "It's usually unlocked during the day, but with the power out, the electronic locks are offline. You might have to force it." Claire glanced at me. "Can you do that?" I didn't answer. My hands were trembling too much to think straight. We started climbing. The stairwell was a narrow concrete shaft, the emergency lights flickering with alarming frequency. At each landing, the shadows seemed to gather, stretching like dark fingers that threatened to close in. From behind us came a faint scraping sound, soft, deliberate. I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. "Nothing." Claire gripped my arm. "We're not alone." A chill ran down my spine. The woman with the smile, somewhere in the building, still lurking. We pressed on, step by step. When we reached the 3rd floor, Harold stopped abruptly. "There's a fire escape out this way," he whispered. "It leads to the alley behind the building." I blinked. Could it be open? He nodded, eyes flickering nervously. "It's old, but the door should unlock from the inside." We hurried down the hall, breath shallow, nerves frayed. The fire escape door stood heavy and steel, scarred by rust and neglect. Harold pulled at the handle. It resisted. "Help me," he said. Together we pushed. It groaned, then gave way, creaking open to a gust of cold night air. The alley was narrow, littered with trash bins and broken glass. The sky above was thick with clouds, blocking the moon. Claire shivered. "We have to go down the ladder," I said, staring up the metal rungs that disappeared into the blackness. Claire hesitated. "I'm not great with heights." Harold smiled weakly. "Neither am I, but it's better than waiting for the lights to go." I took the first step, the metal cold and slick with rain. The ladder swayed slightly beneath me. Halfway down, a sudden noise made me freeze. A muffled cry coming from behind a stack of dumpsters. I glanced down. Claire was staring toward the sound, face pale. Harold leaned closer. "That's her." The woman, the one with the smile. We moved toward the noise cautiously. The alley was cramped and wet, the air thick with the smell of rotting garbage and diesel fumes. A figure crouched beside a dumpster, hunched and shaking. The woman looked up, eyes wild and desperate, but the smile was gone. "I didn't want to scare you," she whispered. I don't have anywhere else." Claire knelt beside her, voice gentle. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The woman shook her head, but her lip quivered. Suddenly, a sound shattered the silence, footsteps pounding behind us. "Run," I shouted. We all scrambled, but the woman faltered, caught on a jagged piece of metal. She fell hard, a sharp cry tearing from her throat. I turned, heart in my throat, to see a man stepping into the alley, tall, bulky, face shadowed beneath a hood. His eyes gleamed cold. "Get back," I yelled, trying to shield Claire and Harold. The man laughed, low and harsh. "Looks like you've got company," he said, advancing. Panic surged through me. The woman was bleeding, Claire limping, Harold shaky. I grabbed a nearby metal pipe, rusty but heavy. The man took another step, and I swung. The pipe connected with a sickening clang. He stumbled back, snarling. Claire grabbed a trash can lid, holding it like a shield. "Call the cops," she shouted. "No signal," I barked. "We're on our own." The man lunged. I swung again, this time catching him across the side. He howled, grabbing his face. We ran, fast and reckless, toward the end of the alley. The fire escape ladder loomed above us. Claire was first, struggling but climbing. Harold followed, slower, trembling. I helped the woman, who was barely conscious, onto the first rung. The man's footsteps thundered behind. At the top, the door was locked again. I pounded on it, shouting for help. Then the lock clicked, a key turning from the other side. Harold pushed the door open, just as the man reached the bottom of the ladder, cursing. We collapsed inside the stairwell, gasping, the woman's breathing shallow. Back in the apartment, the power flickered, then returned. We laid the woman on the couch, Claire applying pressure to a bleeding cut on her arm. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered again. "I didn't want any of this." Jack, exhausted and bruised, sat back against the wall. The weight of what had happened settled in. The stranger, the dark, the danger, all very real, and all costing something. The first ambulance's red and blue glow sliced through the gray dawn as we waited on the cracked sidewalk outside the building. Claire sat on the stoop, her knee bandaged, but still throbbing, head bowed, fingers twisting the edge of her jacket like a lifeline. Harold shuffled beside her, leaning heavily on his cane, pale but steady. I stood a few feet away, hands shoved deep in my coat pockets, staring at the yellow tape stretched taut around the front entrance. The woman, the one with the strange smile, was inside the ambulance, wrapped in a thin blanket, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Paramedics moved quickly, methodical, efficient, like they'd seen this kind of thing before. The police had arrived hours earlier, combing the alley and questioning neighbors. Harold spoke with them briefly, explaining the noises, the blackout, and our escape. I answered questions too, voice hoarse from lack of sleep, heart still knotted tight. Claire finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "Do you think she'll be okay?" I shrugged, not knowing. "I hope so." She looked scared more than anything. She nodded, biting her lip. I can't stop thinking about her smile. Too many teeth. It wasn't right. But now, I think maybe it was just fear twisting everything. We sat in silence, the city waking slowly around us, a dog barking somewhere, the rumble of buses starting their routes, the distant clang of construction. Later at the precinct, the officers told us the man who attacked was known locally. A transient with a history of violence, caught on camera in nearby incidents, but never arrested. They assured us they'd find him. Harold sighed. "It's not much comfort, but at least they're trying." Jack, that's me, felt the weight of it all crashing down. My hands still trembled from the fight, my throat dry, my mind racing with every what if. The doctor patched Claire's knee with gentle hands, giving her a prescription and advice to keep it clean. Harold was checked over for exhaustion and stress. The woman was admitted to the hospital, her identity unknown, no contacts. The police hoped she'd remember enough to help. Back at the apartment later that day, the lights worked again. The hum of the refrigerator, a dull reassurance. But the place felt different, hollowed out, marked. Claire paced the small living room, restless. I keep replaying everything. The laughs, the footsteps, that smile. It's like it's stuck under my skin. I nodded, rubbing my own sore wrists. Me too. I'm scared it's not really over, that we just got lucky. Harold called later, voice steady, but low. I'm going to ask the landlord to change the locks on the basement door. No way I'm going down there again. That night, as the city settled into quiet, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. The shadows played tricks, and sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw her, the woman with too many teeth, smiling again. But when I turned, nothing was there. Outside, the street lamp flickered once, twice, before steadying. The dark held its secret still. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. This is Mia Horror Stories, and tonight's story she texted me from her own funeral is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. My phone buzzed twice. Once was the standard vibration from my pocket. The other was a faint ping, like a single chime from an old music box, quiet, but impossible to ignore. I pulled it out. The screen lit up. The message came from Jess. I'm here. It was 11:02 a.m., April 12th, and my hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone on the hardwood floor. But Jess was dead. They had announced it 3 days ago. The police said it was an accident, but the way the news spread, it felt more like a headline that came too soon for some part of me. My apartment in the East End of Boston felt too warm, even though the window was cracked open, letting in the chill of a late spring morning. The smell of burnt coffee still lingered, a cruel reminder I had barely touched the mug on my desk. I stared at the text. "I'm here." I told myself it was a prank, a wrong number. My phone could be hacked, or someone could be screwing with me. But deep down, I knew that message wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a mistake. I pressed the screen, trying to open the conversation. There was no reply, just that one message. The clock ticked louder than usual. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed in the distance, winding its way between the brick buildings like a restless ghost. The air smelled faintly of rain, though no drops had fallen yet. I sat down, my back against the cracked leather of my worn-out couch. The coffee was cold now, forgotten. I had to make sense of it, but everything felt slippery, like trying to hold water in my palm. That's when my phone buzzed again. The screen showed a different number. I saw her too, at the church. My breath hitched. The funeral was today, a few miles away at St. Augustine. I hadn't planned on going. I didn't want to face the crowd, the forced condolences, the hollow sympathies. Jess was my closest friend for nearly a decade, and somehow the thought of sitting among strangers, pretending to mourn her made my stomach twist. But now I had no choice. I needed answers. I grabbed my coat, the one with fraying cuffs, and slipped my phone into the pocket. The streets outside were busy, people going about their Saturday, unaware of the strange weight pressing on my chest. The church was an old brick building with peeling white paint and a bell tower that looked like it had seen better days. Inside, the smell of lilies and polished wood mixed with the heavy scent of damp coats and perfume. The light was dim, filtering through stained glass windows that cast muted rainbows across the pews. The crowd was a patchwork of people I half recognized, neighbors, co-workers, distant cousins, faces mostly unfamiliar or unreadable. Everyone was quiet, murmuring in low tones, except for a woman sobbing softly near the front. I spotted Jess's parents. They looked smaller than I remembered, as if grief had shrunk them. Her mother clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed, while her father stood rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. I moved toward the back, trying to blend in, but my heart hammered. The ceremony was about to begin, and somewhere behind the pulpit, I felt eyes watching me. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, this time a message from Jess's number. "Look behind you." The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I turned slowly. There was no one there, but an elderly man with a cane and a woman adjusting a toddler's coat. The funeral mass started, the priest's voice steady but distant, like it was coming through a thick wall. I sat down, gripping my phone in my palm, the screen dark now, waiting for the next move. The last hymn died away. The priest stepped down from the pulpit, eyes sweeping over the congregation with practiced solemnity. I still had the phone pressed to my thigh, heart ticking against my ribs like a warning bell. The funeral was supposed to be the end of it, a final goodbye. But instead, it felt like a beginning somewhere dark, far from the comfort of closure. Then my phone buzzed again. "We don't have much time. Look outside, hurry." The message came from Jess's number again. I glanced around. People were shifting in their seats, some whispering, others wiping eyes. My hands were clammy, the phone slipping in my grip. I turned to Jess's parents, who were staring straight ahead, lost in their grief. A sharp tug on my sleeve made me look down. "Elliot," the voice was low, urgent. It was a woman, a stranger. Mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She glanced nervously around the room. "I'm sorry to bother you," she whispered. "I'm Rachel. I'm connected to Jess. I saw your text. You're not imagining things." My throat tightened. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Rachel's eyes flicked toward the church doors. "She's not really dead." That sentence hit me like a slap. "She's alive?" I asked, voice barely audible. Rachel nodded quickly. "But if she is, someone wants to keep it that way. There's been some weird stuff happening around here." My pulse quickened. I had to believe her, but part of me screamed that this was some sick joke. "I don't understand," I said. "If Jess is alive, why the funeral?" Rachel hesitated. "Because it's the perfect cover. No one expects her to be alive after this." The church felt smaller, suffocating. Somewhere near the back, a child whimpered softly. My phone buzzed again. "Behind the chapel, please." Rachel glanced at my phone, alarm in her eyes. "We have to move now," she said. Outside, the church courtyard was busy with people milling around, some clutching tissues, others exchanging quiet condolences. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of freshly cut grass and distant exhaust fumes. I followed Rachel quickly, dodging a group of elderly ladies in floral hats. My mind raced. Jess's death had left a hole, but Rachel's claim shattered everything I thought I knew. I was scared to believe it, scared to dismiss it. "Wait," I said, slowing down. "How do you know she's alive? What proof do you have?" Rachel bit her lip, scanning the street. "Last night, I saw her, Jess, at a diner near Fenway Park. She looked scared, confused, like she didn't know where to go." I swallowed hard, memories flashing of the last time I saw Jess, her jittery phone calls, vague mentions of threats, and that night she disappeared. Rachel glanced over her shoulder. "There's more. People have been asking questions. Nosy neighbors, some old friends. Someone is watching, and they don't want Jess found." We reached the side of the church. The chapel entrance was locked, but a side door to the courtyard was slightly ajar. Rachel pushed it open. Inside was dim and cold. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old stone. The floor creaked beneath our feet as we moved down a narrow corridor lined with framed photographs of past ceremonies. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the space, then cut out. We were plunged into silence and shadow. I fumbled for my phone to turn on the flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness. Rachel's breath was quick, uneven. "We need to find her before they do," she whispered. A sharp bang echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. A door slammed shut. I froze. "Did you hear that?" Rachel whispered. "We're not alone," I said, voice tight. We moved cautiously toward the chapel, each step weighted with fear and anticipation. My hands trembled, not just from the cold or darkness, but because I'd never been this close to danger before. A sudden movement in the corner of my eye made me spin around. Nothing, just shadows. Then the phone buzzed again. "They're coming, please hurry." The weight of those words crushed me. We reached a set of double doors leading into the chapel proper. Heavy oak, polished but worn with age. Rachel tried the handle, locked. I rattled the knob, heart pounding. "God, come on," I muttered. From behind, we heard footsteps. Fast, deliberate. Rachel's voice was urgent now. "We have to find another way." I looked around. A small window near the floor, partly obscured by a pew. "Help me with this." She crouched, and I pushed the window open. It was tight, but we could slip through. Outside, the church's back garden was quiet. The grass was wet with dew, and a cold breeze stirred the branches of a lone oak tree. Then a flashlight beam cut through the dark. A voice barked from the shadows. "Stop right there." We sprinted across the garden, branches scraping against our faces, hearts hammering in our ears. Rachel stumbled, her ankle twisting sharply on the uneven ground. She cried out, clutching it. I had to decide, keep running or stop and help her. The flashlight beam was getting closer. The cold night air cut through my thin jacket as I half carried, half supported Rachel across the church's back garden. The flashlight beam from behind traced every step, slicing through the dark like a predator's gaze. Her ankle throbbed visibly, and every wince she stifled made my chest tighten. We ducked behind the low stone wall that bordered the garden, trying to catch our breath. The street beyond was quiet, dimly lit by sodium lamps, their orange glow flickering in the breeze. "Where now?" I asked, whispering. Rachel pressed her palm to the ground, eyes scanning the shadows. "There's an alley along Washington Street, a few blocks from here. I think Jess might be hiding in an old warehouse there." The warehouse was a relic of Boston's industrial past, long abandoned, but occasionally used by squatters and drifters. It wasn't exactly a safe bet, but it was the only lead we had. The street was mostly empty, except for a homeless man sitting by a doorway, muttering to himself. We skirted around him, careful not to draw attention. Every step was a battle. Rachel's limp slowed us down, and the dull ache in my calves reminded me how unprepared I was for this kind of chase. As we neared Washington Street, the rhythmic pounding of distant footsteps echoed again. The pursuers weren't giving up. Rachel groaned, and I grabbed her arm. "Hold on, we're almost there." The alley was narrow, flanked by towering brick buildings stained with graffiti and grime. Trash bins overflowed with rotting debris, and the smell of urine and damp concrete hung heavy. Rachel pointed to a side door, rusty but not locked. She tried the handle. It gave way with a creak. Inside, the warehouse was vast and cavernous, swallowed in shadows. The smell of dust and mold filled the air. Broken windows let in shards of moonlight that glinted off puddles on the cracked floor. We moved cautiously. Every creak and drip seemed louder than it should be, the silence pressing against my ears. Suddenly, a noise, metal clanging somewhere deeper in the warehouse. I froze, heart racing. Rachel's eyes darted toward the sound. Maybe it's Jess. We moved toward the noise, the beam from my phone slicing through the darkness. Then a figure leapt out from behind a stack of wooden crates. I gasped, stumbling backward. But it was Jess. It was a stray dog, skinny and mangy, barking fiercely before bounding away into the shadows. Rachel laughed softly, tension breaking for a moment. "That was close," she said. We pressed on, deeper into the warehouse, until we found a makeshift camp, a tattered sleeping bag, empty cans, and a few personal belongings strewn about. "No, Jess." I sank onto an overturned crate, rubbing my face. The weight of exhaustion was settling in, and Rachel's breathing was ragged. My phone buzzed again. "Don't trust Rachel. She's not who she says." I stared at the message, disbelief crashing down. The number was Jess's. "Rachel," I said quietly, "I just got a message saying not to trust you." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't deny it. "Who else knows you're here?" I asked, voice low. She shook her head. "No one, I swear." Before I could press further, a heavy thud echoed behind us. We spun around to see a pair of figures stepping through the broken entrance, flashlights cutting through the dark. "They found us," Rachel hissed. We ducked behind a stack of crates, hearts pounding. I tried to control my breathing, but my chest felt tight. The pursuers moved methodically, sweeping their lights side to side. One paused, shining the beam directly at us. I froze. The flashlight hit a hanging tarp, and it swayed in the draft, nothing more than a piece of old fabric. The pursuers moved on. I exhaled slowly. Rachel leaned against me, voice trembling. "We need another plan." I agreed. We backtracked through the warehouse, trying to find an exit on the other side. Rachel's limp was slowing us down more than ever, and my muscles screamed with fatigue. Outside, the city seemed indifferent, distant car horns, muffled voices, the steady hum of night. We found a side gate leading to an alley behind the warehouse. It was padlocked, but Rachel produced a small pocket knife. I watched nervously as she worked at the lock, sweat beading on her forehead. The gate finally gave way with a soft click. We slipped through, relief flooding me. But the relief was short-lived. Across the alley, a black van idled with its engine running, lights off, but windows tinted. From inside, a shadowy figure watched us. Rachel grabbed my arm. "They're waiting." We had nowhere left to run. The black van waited like a predator in the narrow alley, its dark windows reflecting the dim streetlights like glossy eyes. Rachel's grip on my arm tightened so hard it stung, her face pale under the flickering glow. "We can't stay here," she whispered. I nodded, heart hammering. The adrenaline was sharp, raw, but underneath it all, my muscles screamed with exhaustion. Every breath was ragged. The van door slid open with a hiss. Two men stepped out, tall, bulky, faces obscured beneath baseball caps. They moved fast, silent as shadows. No time for hesitation. I glanced around. The alley was a dead end, brick walls on either side, trash bins, and the locked gate we just passed through. The only option was back the way we came. "Run," I shouted, pulling Rachel forward. Her limp was more pronounced now, pain etched in every step. The men gave chase, voices low but sharp. "Stop them," one barked. We sprinted toward the warehouse entrance, the cold concrete biting into my palms as I pushed the door open and dragged Rachel inside. The familiar cavernous darkness swallowed us whole. I fumbled for my phone, flashlight on, scanning the shadows. The sound of boots echoed behind us. "We need to hide," Rachel gasped, clutching her ankle. There was an old office space to the left, a small room with broken windows and dusty furniture. We slipped inside and slammed the door. My fingers shook as I locked it. Outside, footsteps paced, then stopped. Suddenly, the door handle rattled. One of the men was trying to force it open. I looked at Rachel. She was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. "Any idea where Jess might be?" I asked, voice low but urgent. Rachel shook her head. "No, she vanished after I last saw her. But whoever these men are, they're connected to why she's in hiding." The handle rattled again. I peeked through the cracked window. The men were searching the hallway, flashing their lights, calling out. Then a sudden realization hit me. The old electrical panel was on the wall opposite the door, an exposed mess of switches and wires. If I could cut the power, it might buy us time. I slipped out of the office while Rachel covered her eyes. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. "Shit," one of the men shouted. I heard hurried footsteps retreating. Back in the room, Rachel was breathing hard. "Good thinking," she said. But relief was short-lived. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jess. "Trust no one. Meet me at the pier. Midnight." Rachel's eyes widened. "Midnight, only an hour away," she said. "If we wait too long, they'll find you." We had no choice. I helped Rachel to her feet, supporting her as we left the office. The warehouse felt like a tomb, without power, cold, silent except for our footsteps. Outside, the night air hit like a wall. The pier was a 15-minute walk along the harbor, past dark warehouses and empty docks. I kept glancing over my shoulder, paranoia clawing at me. Near the pier, a stray cat darted from the shadows, its eyes glowing. My heart jumped, but it was just a cat. At the pier entrance, the cold salt breeze stung my face. We saw Jess standing there. She looked thin, worn, but alive. Her eyes held something fierce, fear, defiance, exhaustion. "Elliot," she said softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I had to disappear." Before I could respond, headlights blazed behind us. The black van screeched to a halt at the pier's edge. The two men jumped out, guns drawn. "Stay back," one shouted. I shoved Rachel behind me. Jess stepped forward. "I'm not going back," she said, voice steady. The men advanced. I looked at Rachel, who nodded weakly. There was no way out. Suddenly, a scuffle. One man lunged at Jess. I grabbed a rusted metal pipe from nearby and swung hard. It connected with a sickening crack. The man dropped. The other fired a shot into the air. "Enough," he shouted. Jess grabbed Rachel's hand. "We run now," she said. We bolted toward the pier's end, the water dark and deep beneath us. The men shouted curses, but they didn't follow. We collapsed on the wooden planks, breaths ragged, bodies trembling. Rachel's ankle bloodied, but she was alive. Jess looked at me, eyes glistening. "Thank you," she said. But the danger wasn't over. We were exposed, vulnerable, and hunted. And as the distant sirens grew louder, I knew the cost of this night wasn't just pain or fear. It was the fracture in trust, the weight of secrets, and the knowledge that freedom would always be fragile. The ambulance smelled of antiseptic and something faintly sweet, like burnt sugar. Rachel was in the back, her ankle swaddled awkwardly in a splint. Jess sat beside her, quiet, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. I rode up front with the paramedic, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were still shaking, and the ache in my chest hadn't eased. The cold from the pier had seeped into my bones. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow that seemed both too bright and too cold. Rachel was admitted for observation, and they insisted Jess stay for questioning. I sat in the waiting area, alone with my thoughts, replaying the last 24 hours like a broken record. Jess had vanished without a trace. That wasn't a metaphor. She had literally slipped away from everyone she knew and trusted, including me. The truth, when it came, was a mess of fear and threats tied to a company. She'd worked for something involving whistleblowing, surveillance, and a web of lies that stretched far beyond our city. Her death, the funeral, even the texts, they were all part of a plan to protect her from enemies who would go to great lengths to keep their secrets. Rachel, I learned later, had been sent to keep tabs on Jess, maybe even mislead anyone who got too close. She wasn't a friend, but not exactly an enemy either, more like a reluctant participant caught in the middle. That warning message on my phone, it wasn't to protect me, but to sow confusion, to make sure I was off balance. I felt used, angry, but mostly exhausted. The police questioned us extensively. Nothing came of it immediately. The pursuers vanished as quietly as they appeared. Jess, Rachel, and I were left to pick up the pieces in our separate ways. Weeks later, I found myself back in my apartment. The windows were open, and the spring air was warmer now, but the scent of that cold April morning still lingered somewhere beneath the surface, like the faint smell of coffee, burnt but not gone. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "You're safer now, but watch the shadows." No signature, no reply. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming.